And, we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but, we were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying and our missions.
UFOs used to be a fringe subject, tucked into tabloid covers and whispered about in secret. But now, the voices speaking are decorated Navy pilots, senior intelligence officers, and even members of Congress sitting under oath and insisting that something is happening in our skies. Joe Rogan has given these men hours of space on his podcast, where their words flow with the weight of lived experience. What they describe is more than lights in the sky. They suggest our government may have already spoken with beings from outside our reality. The question is simple: are we ready to listen? Ryan Graves and the Navy Encounters. Ryan Graves came from the world of hard data and daily risk. He studied mechanical and aerospace engineering before entering the Navy to fly F-18 fighter jets. He flew combat missions and taught younger pilots the kind of precision that keeps people alive. His life was not built on wild stories, but on technical accuracy. That is what makes his testimony so compelling. In 2014, Graves' squadron upgraded its radar systems off Virginia Beach. Overnight, the instruments began showing dozens of contacts. At first, they assumed it was a malfunction, but as days turned into weeks, the anomalies persisted. Then, the cameras confirmed the readings. Objects were captured on infrared systems. And finally, pilots began to report direct visual sightings. The strangest object was described as a black cube inside a transparent sphere around 15 feet across, hanging silently in airspace reserved for military training. Graves said these objects were not rare. They were daily. Crews learned to expect them. Flights were rerouted to avoid them. Yet, despite the risk, almost nobody wanted to report it officially. The reason was stigma. Pilots feared losing their flight status or their careers. A community built on debriefs and brutal honesty suddenly grew quiet. One pilot returned from a flight pale, still wearing his gear, and when asked what happened, he said only, "I can't talk about it." Then silence. Rogan found the contradiction fascinating. The best trained observers in the world, trusted with supersonic jets and advanced weapons, were discouraged from describing what they saw with their own eyes. He laughed at the absurdity, but pointed to the danger. If the people we rely on for national security are too scared to speak, what kind of truth is being buried right at the edge of our vision? If even elite pilots are afraid to describe what they see, who else is carrying secrets we never hear? The silence of the ready room. Inside a squadron, the ready room is where honesty rules. After every flight, pilots debrief with precision. Mistakes are dissected, threats are analyzed, checklists are followed. It is a culture of brutal truth because lives depend on it. Yet, when the strange contacts began appearing, the ready room changed. The air grew heavy, stories were cut short. The kind of candor that keeps squadrons alive gave way to silence. Graves remembered one particular flight. 2 jets entered controlled airspace at the same time an unidentified object passed directly between them. The lead pilot saw it clearly. He came back visibly shaken, his gear still on, which is never a good sign. But instead of a detailed description, he shut down. He admitted he saw something, but refused to say more. Nobody pushed him. Nobody wanted to record it. Rogan seized on this point. How could a culture built on radical honesty collapse so quickly under the weight of a stigma? He noted that the same society that celebrates Top Gun pilots for their daring turns around and discourages those same pilots from reporting the most extraordinary hazards they have ever seen. Graves eventually decided he could not live with that contradiction. He left active service and founded Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization to protect pilots who come forward. He knew the silence of the ready room was not just bad culture, it was a systemic failure. The irony is painful. The very people trained to recognize threats and hazards were taught to ignore the biggest unknown in their skies. If professionals keep silent, what chance does the public have of learning the truth? Rogan's frontier analogy, Joe, Rogan is not a scientist, but he has a knack for painting vivid pictures. Listening to Graves describe the encounters, he asked his audience to imagine something different. Picture a civilization 1 million years older than ours. Imagine a society with no wars, no crime, no lies, where people communicate with perfect honesty and share knowledge instantly. Now, place them next to Earth. To such beings, our world would look like the Wild West. Nuclear power barely mastered, airplanes only a century old, digital networks still fragile. Humanity still fights wars, still steals, still argues over borders. Watching us would be like us traveling back to an 1830s gold rush town, chaotic, dangerous, but fascinating. Rogan argued that if he lived in that advanced world, he would absolutely visit Earth. Just as we study primitive tribes or ancient ruins, they would study us as we stumble toward maturity. These encounters might not be invasions at all. They could be field trips, observations, or experiments conducted with clinical patients. Graves did not dismiss the thought. He admitted that the data itself pushed him toward explanations outside human technology. The objects ignored physics as we know it. They hovered in high winds. They shifted directions abruptly. They flew racetrack patterns as if surveying. And when approached, they sometimes accelerated faster than any known jet. If Rogan's analogy is correct, then these encounters are not accidents. They are visits from a civilization that treats us the way we treat history. The unsettling thought is simple. What if we are not just being observed, but graded? The Tic-Tac shock. The encounter that brought UFOs into the mainstream was the Tic-Tac sighting. In 2004, Commander David Fravor led a squadron off the coast of California. Radar had reported objects descending from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds, as if gravity itself did not apply. Fravor moved to intercept, expecting perhaps a drone or a malfunction. What he saw instead was a white capsule, smooth and featureless, about the size of his own jet. It had no wings, no exhaust, no visible means of propulsion. When he descended, it descended. When he turned, it mirrored him with uncanny precision. Then, as he tried to cut across, it disappeared and reappeared 60 miles away in a matter of seconds. The laws of physics, as he understood them, simply did not apply to what he was chasing. Fravor later testified that the performance was beyond any known material science, not in 2004, not today, not in the next 20 years. His authority as a seasoned commander made the statement powerful. This was not a fringe voice grasping for attention. This was a respected pilot admitting, in clear and careful terms, that he had faced something he could not explain. Rogan loved the absurdity of the blurry video that accompanied the story. He joked about how alien footage always looks like it was filmed on a 1993 camcorder, but then he went quiet and said the obvious. The video mattered less than the witness. Fravor had no incentive to exaggerate or invent. His credibility made the case impossible to laugh off. If America's best pilots, flying its most advanced jets, are describing objects that outperform them in open skies, then the world has already changed. And if such events happened 20 years ago, how much more might have occurred since, unseen and unspoken, waiting to be acknowledged? The whistleblower's allegations. David Grush added fuel to the fire. He had spent 14 years as an intelligence officer with the Air Force and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In 2023, he stepped forward as a whistleblower. What he claimed was explosive. He alleged that the United States had recovered non-human craft. He said biological remains had been retrieved. He insisted that reverse engineering programs had been running for decades, hidden even from Congress. Under oath, Grush said he had not personally seen the beings but had spoken with people who had. He claimed to have delivered classified evidence to inspectors general. He insisted that secrecy was maintained not for national security but to control knowledge. Rogan balanced his usual humor with a sharper tone. He joked about how every alien photo seems blurry. He complained that believers accept bad evidence too easily. But he admitted that if even a fraction of Grush's claims were true, the implications were staggering. Entire chapters of history would have to be rewritten. The idea that advanced technology and possibly biological samples have been hidden for decades is not just a scientific bombshell. it is a crisis of democracy. If unelected officials and private contractors are controlling information that even Congress cannot see, then power rests outside the system the public thinks it controls. So what is more frightening? The idea that aliens are here, or the idea that some people already know and refuse to tell the rest of us? Secrets buried from Congress. The July 2023 congressional hearing was meant to be a breakthrough moment. For decades, the subject of UFOs had been dismissed as rumor or science fiction. Here was a chance for sworn witnesses to speak openly in front of lawmakers and the American public. The hope was that sunlight would finally burn away the shadows. Instead, the hearing revealed just how little light is allowed to pass through. David Grush, the intelligence officer turned whistleblower, sat calmly before Congress as the questions came. Had craft been recovered? He answered yes. Had biological entities been retrieved? Again, yes. But when pressed for details, he drew the line. Those specifics could only be shared behind closed doors in a secure facility. To many, the careful answers felt like both a confirmation and a reminder of how far the truth still is from public view. The most shocking moment came not from the witnesses, but from the lawmakers themselves. Congressman Matt Gaetz described how he and other members of Congress were denied access when they traveled to Eglin Air Force Base to investigate a reported UAP incident. They had clearance, they had authority, and yet officials told them no. Even elected representatives, entrusted by the people to oversee military operations, were treated like outsiders trying to sneak into a private club. The implications are staggering. If Congress, the body charged with oversight, can be blocked at the door, then who exactly is in control? Not the voters, not the elected officials, but the unelected gatekeepers who decide what can and cannot be seen. It suggests a shadow layer of governance where contractors and long-serving intelligence officers, not presidents or senators, hold the keys. Rogan leaned into the absurdity of this imbalance. He laughed at the image of presidents golfing while secrets older than their lifetimes sat in vaults just a few miles away. He reminded listeners that presidents serve 4 or 8 years, senators eventually retire, but the people inside intelligence agencies and defense corporations stay for decades. They become the keepers of continuity, the ones who know what came before and what must stay hidden. Power does not lie with the person whose name appears on a ballot. It lies with those who remain unseen, year after year, passing secrets like heirlooms. And if oversight can be denied so casually, what does that say about the balance of power in a democracy? The ocean theories. One of the most intriguing patterns in sightings is their proximity to water. Over and over again, pilots, sailors, and radar operators report objects hovering over the ocean, diving into the sea without creating a splash, and moving underwater at speeds that defy human engineering. These craft are often described as transmedium, meaning they can travel seamlessly through air and water. The Pacific coast near California has long been a hotspot. Pilots describe craft darting above the waves, then plunging below the surface with impossible ease. Off Virginia Beach, the same behavior was observed. Hawaii, too, has produced reports of glowing orbs vanishing into the sea. To dismiss these as illusions would mean ignoring consistent testimonies from professionals whose jobs depend on accurate observation. Joe Rogan broke it down in plain language. Build a secret base in the Nevada desert and satellites will spot it. Build one under 2 miles of water and you can live there unseen for centuries. Humanity has mapped more of Mars than the ocean floor. We have explored only a fraction of what lies beneath the waves. If advanced beings wanted to establish a foothold, the deep ocean would be the perfect hiding place. This perspective changes the way we think about the search for extraterrestrial life. For decades, we have looked up, scanning the stars with telescopes, sending probes to other planets, and dreaming of signals from distant galaxies. Yet the truth may be much closer, hidden in the abyss of our own planet. The sightings near water may not be coincidences. They may be signposts pointing us toward a truth we have overlooked. So perhaps the real question is not whether we should look to the stars, but whether we should finally turn our gaze to the depths and ask who, or what, might already be living there. The interdimensional debate. If aliens from another planet stretch the imagination, the idea of interdimensional beings bends it to the breaking point. Yet this is exactly where some witnesses point. They suggest the craft are not extraterrestrial, but interdimensional, operating outside of the physical limits we understand. Joe Rogan seized on the idea with his usual mix of curiosity and skepticism. What if these beings were always here, not arriving from light years away, but existing in layers of reality just beyond our perception? What if ancient texts describing angels, messengers, or otherworldly visitors were not metaphors, but early attempts to record the same encounters we now see with radar and cameras? What if the supernatural and the scientific were never separate categories at all? Physics itself leaves the door open. Theories of multiple dimensions, quantum fields, and the possibility of parallel realities already circulate in academic circles. If a craft could create its own pocket of reality, it would not be breaking our rules. It would be playing by rules we have not yet discovered. That would explain the impossible. Right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds, hovering without wings or rotors, seamless transitions between air and water. These are not mistakes or misreadings. They are glimpses of a technology that bends the space around it. The idea forces us to rethink not only the future, but also the past. How many myths, miracles, and legends could be reinterpreted as encounters with interdimensional visitors? How many unexplained phenomena throughout history were glimpses through a doorway we did not recognize? If reality has layers we have never walked through, then perhaps our history is already entangled with beings we have never formally met. How much of human progress has been shaped by visitors walking through doors we cannot even see? Evidence, silence, and human fear. The demand for proof is relentless. People want a crystal-clear photo, a high-resolution video, or a piece of material that can be examined in a lab. What the public usually gets instead are blurry infrared clips, shaky footage, or radar data that only specialists can interpret. The gap between expectation and evidence fuels skepticism. Rogan often mocked the poor quality of the imagery. He joked about why every alien photo looks like it was taken with a flip phone from the 1990s, but beneath the laughter, he pointed to something deeper. The credibility of the witnesses matters more than the clarity of the pixels. When Navy pilots, radar operators, and intelligence officers risk their reputations to describe what they saw, that testimony deserves weight. The real barrier is not evidence, but fear. Pilots hesitate to file reports, worried about losing flight status. Intelligence officers worry about retaliation. Lawmakers hesitate to press too hard, fearing political ridicule. Whistleblowers face threats to their careers and, at times, their safety. Against that backdrop, it is remarkable that any testimony has reached the public at all. Rogan captured the human side with a comment that resonates. He said that if he ever shook hands with an alien, he would never sleep again. The knowledge would consume him. That thought reveals why disclosure is so difficult. The truth may already be known in private rooms, but admitting it publicly would overwhelm the world. Religion would have to confront beings outside its texts. Politics would have to acknowledge forces beyond its control. Science would have to expand its boundaries overnight. So perhaps the silence is not only about secrecy, but about fear. Fear that humanity is not at the top of the ladder. Fear that our institutions cannot handle the shift. Fear that knowledge might fracture society instead of uniting it. Is the truth hidden to protect us from chaos, or to protect those who benefit from keeping the power in their hands? Ryan Graves, David Fravor, and David Grush did not whisper their stories in bars or on internet forums. They sat under oath in front of cameras and told the world that something extraordinary is happening. Joe Rogan amplified their voices, pressing with curiosity, joking to cut the tension, and asking the questions that officials dodge. What emerges is clear. Something is in our skies. Something is in our oceans. Something may even be in dimensions beyond our own. The government admits it does not have all the answers, yet also admits it hides what it knows. The debate is no longer about whether the phenomenon is real. The debate is about how long society can pretend it does not matter, and when the day comes, whether tomorrow or decades from now, when the truth is undeniable, how will humanity respond? Will we collapse in fear, cling to denial, or open our minds to a universe larger than we ever imagined? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe on our channel.